Okay, so this is going to be your first Revit introduction. If you have used Revit before, this is basically just going to be running over some of the more basic user interface stuff and get you guys familiar with kind of the way that Revit is laid out, so that hopefully that'll speed up your ability to find some stuff when you actually get into it. So when you open Revit, you'll have a window similar to this. These kinds of things will change for you. These may be the same. And this is Revit 2015. These are your most recent projects that have been opened up. So these will vary from person to person depending on what you're doing. Up here in the top left is the R, and this kind of brings up your larger menu, and this shows you your most recent. If you just hover over the R, this shows you a little bit more in terms of recent stuff. Also, your export options, things like that, are also here. Down here in the corner is the Options tab, where you can coordinate stuff for the entirety of Revit. So you can set up notifications to remind you to save. If your computer has a tendency to crash on you or something like that, I would set this up for something more like every 15 minutes. There are modes in Revit where it will not remind you to save while you're in those. So if you're in an editing mode for an extended period of time, which can happen, you might be in an editing mode for an hour, hour and a half, depending on what exactly you're doing. It won't remind you to save until you're out of that editing mode. So if you're in an editing mode for an hour and 15 minutes and then your computer crashes, you just lost an hour and 15 minutes worth of stuff. This Synchronize with Central Reminder, that is more for if you're working on a larger project. You're working with multiple people in the same file at the same time. You create a central file, and then each one of you has your own local files, and then all of your local files save to that central file, and it updates that as things change within each of your models. It can be real handy for larger companies and stuff like that. Autodesk 360, I'll get into that a little bit later. It has its uses, but it's getting there. It's one of their newer additions. The rest of this is just kind of up to you, how you want things to lay out, what kind of look you're going for. Do you prefer the white background, or do you prefer the dark? And then just colors of various things, where your files are located, just random things that as you get into Revit you may like, you may not like, and you can come in here and change those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit New Project, and these are the default templates. You can make your own template. So if for whatever reason you get into the architectural template and you say, you know what, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I don't need and I don't want, you can go ahead and create your own template and go ahead and browse to that. But I'm going to start with just the basic architectural template. That way we're all working in the same with the same stuff. So create new project rather than project template. Like I said, you can make your own template. If you wanted to, you'd click on that. So hit OK, and it'll open that up. Give it a second here. Okay, so when you open up, you've got a few different things going on here. You have your ribbon at the top. The ribbon at the top is divided into all of these different categories, and there's 100 different tools to each one of them, and some of them have various things buried underneath each one. So like this room area, there's more here. I will say it is nice to have a larger screen when you're working with Revit, just because at smaller screens this can get chopped off, and then some of these tools get buried underneath, and you have to expand out to get to them and stuff like that. So that can be a little annoying at times if you have a smaller screen, but if you set up your hotkeys and stuff like that, rarely will you end up kind of coming up here to use stuff once you kind of get in the flow of things. So that's where your modeling and all of that stuff is. On the left here, you've got your project browser. These may be set up slightly differently in yours than in mine. These may be side by side, going all the way up and down. I prefer to stack them. They just take up less room and I can see more of my model on my screen. So this is your project browser. This is where you flip back and forth between views, where you can find, where your layout sheets are, your elevations, ceiling plans, floor plans. And then if I come up here, there's this little house up here, and if I click that, it goes to my 3D view. Obviously you can't see anything here, but then it'll create this little tab here where I can double click on that and it'll jump straight to my 3D view. If you prefer to come up here and hit that, go for it. Otherwise it'll be here to be used whenever. So going back to the first floor plan, what you're seeing down here is your properties tab. So this is telling me all of the properties of whatever I either have selected or just the view in general. So right now it's just telling me the view because I don't have anything selected. So it's telling me this view is 1/8 inch equals a foot scale. My view type, so I have normal, is it halftone, just various stuff like that. The detail level, you can set various things to only show up at, say, a fine detail or a medium detail. So if it's just a really basic view, you could create a view, hit coarse, and it won't show you a ton of little details throughout the model. But then if you want to see those details, you can go ahead and hit fine, and it will show those. Let's see. So your visibility and graphics, this can be handy if you want to turn certain things off. So right now it shows pretty much everything, but if you wanted to create a view and you don't want to see any of your casework, which is like your cabinets and things like that, all you want are walls, doors, and windows, you can come in here and turn everything off except for walls, doors, and windows. So you've got your model categories, which are your kind of three-dimensional stuff, and then your annotation categories, so things like your dimensions and your like level lines and grids and little things like that, your tags and all the things that you get into when you're creating like a construction document set. You've also got a few other categories here. If you import, say, a CAD file or something, you can control what shows through here, and you can also create filters that will always show the same thing. So if you were to create a filter for, say, all of your wall sections or all of your floor plans, then you just apply that filter to each view and it automatically applies everything the exact same across the board. Other things down here, underlay. So this can be really handy if you lay out your first floor plan, everything looks good, you're fine with it, then you jump to level 2 and now you can't see level 1 anymore. So you want everything to kind of line up top to bottom, so you can kind of come in here and say, okay, I want level 1 as an underlay, and it'll bring your level 1 floor plan in as like a half-tone grayscale, so you can work over the top of it and see what you're dealing with. This project orientation, you probably won't get into that too much. It can be useful in the real world when things aren't oriented the correct way and things like that. So there are various types of wall joints, and depending on what you want to show, you can click those off and on. That's entirely up to you which one you want to go with. If you say clean same type wall joints, basically what that's telling you is if you have a 2x4 wall and it's meeting another 2x4 wall, it's not going to show a line between that connection. But if you have a 2x6 wall and it's joining a 2x4 wall, it's going to draw a little line across there to show the end of that certain wall type. So it'll show the end of the 2x6 wall where it joins to the 2x4 wall. And that can be useful at times for construction documents and things like that to convey how you want something framed for a contractor. Discipline, we're going to stick. This view is set under architectural. If you had a full set of stuff, you can set things to structural and mechanical, what type of view it is. That way it recognizes that when you're creating your sheet list, it'll divide all the architectural views into one section and all the plumbing views into another, all the structural views into another. So that can be useful. You can create a color scheme. We'll get into this a little later. This is really helpful when you're in studio and you have all those little pinups where they're not fully presentation drawings, but you don't want to pin up something. It's a little more formal than just pinning up trace paper or sketches or something. You want to add some color to it, things like that. You can set up presentation drawings, add color schemes to this, so that you can go through and change as much as you want in the model. You can always come back to that presentation drawing and it's going to have your color scheme and everything applied to it. So you don't have to spend time photoshopping a drawing to get it looking fairly nice. You can just click over to your presentation drawing, print it out, and you're good to go. And it looks like you did a lot more than you actually did. So it's a smart way to go about doing your studio projects and stuff. Saves you some time. We'll get into that a little bit later, and I'll show you how that works. So some of these other things I'll get into as we kind of go through some stuff. And I'll get into more details of how some of these other things work as we come to them throughout the semester. So getting into your actual model space, these are your elevation markers. So if you click on just the little caret on the front, it'll show you where that line is for your elevation. If you ever click on an elevation, you've got your project sitting here, and for whatever reason you click on an elevation and it looks like a section and it's cutting through your building for some weird reason, check this. If this line is cutting through your building, it's not going to show anything on this side of it. It's going to show you everything on this side of it and cut through it, so it's going to end up looking like a section. All you have to do is grab it and pull it back so that it shows you your true elevation. At the start, I usually, in my template, my project template, I've moved all of these way out. They don't have a view depth to them. You can set one, but I prefer to have a ton of space in between here, so that way I never encounter that issue. Okay, so now that we've got through all of that stuff, let's get up into your ribbons. So this is kind of your 3D. Your architecture tab is your three-dimensional stuff for the most part, building walls and doors and components and all of that stuff. So if I click on wall, it brings up, since I have something selected here, this, and it has all these built-in wall types. Some of them more useful than others, but once we start getting into your next tutorial will probably be walls and things like that, and how to go about using all this stuff. I'll get into how each one of these wall types is kind of built, and you can start building some of your own, which can be somewhat useful and things like that. So that's where, if you come in here and let's say we just want a generic 8-inch wall, that just means it's 8 inches, it's unspecified what exactly it is. So if I click and I start to draw something, you can see it snaps to feet. As I zoom in, it'll snap to 6 inches every 8 inches, or every inch, and then as I get closer, it'll do half inches, quarter inches, stuff like that. But if I click and I'm pulling off to the side, I can type, say I want this to be 20 feet. As soon as I start typing, it fills the little box in with the 20 feet, and it'll jump to 20 feet. And then I can kind of click around and complete the shape. Now, if I select this wall, it brings up this little temporary dimension, and I can click these little points and it'll snap to different sides of the wall. So if I want the inside of my little room here to be 20 feet, I'll click these little tabs so that it's the inside, and then just punch in 20 feet, and it'll snap to that. So can be fairly nice, just in terms of working with stuff, with your dimensions and things like that. So you don't have to have dimensions on things. You don't have to make a dimension and then delete it. You can go ahead and make make stuff, change dimensions to it without running dimension strings. Another thing that you can do that can be kind of nice, here I'll run a couple rooms here, and then you saw I didn't come up here and click wall to create those. I used the default hotkey, which is WA, and if you ever want to know a hotkey to something, if you hover over it, you see the wall on the little tab that pops out here. In parentheses it says WA. That's your hotkey for all of these different things. So if I hover door, DR, window, WI, component, CM. Yours might be slightly different. It's running off of my hotkey settings right now. WA is the default for your hotkeys. I don't want you to set up your own hotkeys just yet. I want you to use the program a little bit and see how you use it and what you're using a lot. That way, when you set up your hotkeys, you want the stuff that you're using all the time to be right next to your left hand. So WA is right there for my pinky and my ring finger to hit. And then I'll use some stuff. Some of my hotkeys make no sense based on their tool. Like WA makes sense for a wall, DR makes sense for door. But I might have for like trying to think of one that makes sense that I use a decent amount, like split. So if I want to split something, where I would take this wall and instead of it being one big wall, I wanted to split it into two to work with. Instead of SP being my hotkey, which requires me to stretch all the way across my keyboard, my split command is QW, which is in the top left corner. It's right there by my left hand. And it might take a little while to remember what you're doing, but I stuck a little post-it note on my computer with all of my little hotkeys that were obscure, so it's right there in front of me, and I just forced myself to keep doing it, and now I have them all memorized, and I don't even think about it. I just go ahead and do it. So it's something that'll speed you up tenfold if you can get all of your hotkeys kind of in the same area, and you can keep working with it and get quicker and quicker at it. But I'm going to run, instead of, I don't just want dimensions off of this. You can also select multiple things, and if I wanted to move both of these walls a certain distance, I can either move, which is right up here, or I can activate dimensions, and it will give me a dimension string, and I can move this one point to either one of the things I have selected. And let's say I want this one to be 20 feet as well. I can type in 20 feet. I already know this one over here is 20 feet, but it's going to move both of those for me. So that can be really nice. If I mess these up again, and I do run a dimension string across this, I use DI as my hotkey there. Okay, so when I create a dimension string, I have all these references, and it's all to the centers of everything. If I click on my dimension string, you can see I can either lock a dimension in. If I lock a dimension, so let's say I lock that one, and I wanted to move this wall, it moves that one with it. So it's locked to 15'6" no matter what I do. If I change this wall at all, or I move this wall at all, it's going to keep that at 15'6". However, if I unlock all these, you have this EQ with a slash through it. That's telling me that these dimensions are not equal across there. And if I click this, what it's going to do is it's going to hold this point, and then it's going to make the dimensions equal all the way through this string otherwise. So now it tells me, okay, these are equal all the way across. It doesn't give me a dimension anymore, because most of the time in the field, when you're telling somebody I want these equal all the way across there, you don't want to give them a dimension, because in the field it might be built slightly differently. You just want to tell them, string a dimension across this and divide it into 3, and that's what it's going to be. So that can be useful as you kind of get into things. So that's walls. If I click on a wall, I've got all these sort of components of the wall. So right now, it says it's starting at level 1. That's my base constraint. I can offset that. I can say I want it to be a foot below level 1. I want it to be 2 feet above, however you want to set it up. And then right now it's unconnected, and its unconnected height is 20 feet. So right now this wall is 20 feet high, and it goes up to some arbitrary spot. I can click this and say, okay, I want it to go up to level 2. So now that goes up to level 2, and if I go to my 3D view, here we go. If you double click on your scroll wheel, it'll zoom to fit. So if you hold shift and click in on your scroll wheel, it orbits. So as I come around here, I can see all of these walls are still at 20 feet and unconnected. This one is my 10-foot constrained to level 2. So if I select all of these other ones, if you select one and you want to select multiple, you hold control down and it'll select the rest of them. If I wanted to get rid of one of these, I hold shift and click it and it gets rid of it. So if I come over here and say, okay, now I want those to go to level 2, those will all jump down. Now if at any point I want to change where level 2 is, these are going to jump to wherever that is. So if I go to an elevation view, so my south view, I can see here's my elevation of all my walls. You can see the other 2 walls are kind of hidden within that box there. So here's my 2 level lines. I can come over here and say I want this to be 12 feet. So that jumps to 12 feet and my walls extend up. So all of this stuff, it starts to build a kind of knowledge and a nice little system where you can create all sorts of stuff in here that has information built within it and it talks to one another. Rather than in CAD, you have to draw your elevations separate, your sections separate, and everything. Creating a bunch of stuff in floor plan gives you a lot of information in elevation, section, in every other view. So let's say I want to create a door here, so I'm going to click door, and it brings in, right now it just has this single flush door. I can go to load, and it brings up my library of stuff that's built into Revit. I can go to doors and see what all I have here. There's single glass doors, they have some French doors, some panel doors, stuff like that. So let's, that's a glass door, that's kind of weird. So let's go to a single panel. And I'll load that in. So now I have this, and it has some built-in dimensions to it. Some of these are defaults, things that you see all the time. There are some door sizes that you can't get a door in, or it's a custom order kind of thing. So these are fairly decent defaults. I'll go over with you guys as we get into stuff a little bit further, standards and what to look for and what you should be using where and that sort of stuff. But we'll just say at 36 by 80 for right now. And as you can see, as I run over top of a wall, it shows me kind of how this is, where I'm placing this, and it gives me dimensions off of each wall, how far I am. So if I click here, and I don't want my door swing to go into the room, I want it to fold back against that wall, I can click these arrows here, and it'll flip to the other way. If I click this one, it'll flip to the other side, so I can kind of orient that back and forth. When I click this, same as the walls, I get these dimension strings. I can snap it to either side. Let's say I only want this a foot off of that wall. I can hit that, and it'll be there. Same thing for windows. If I click windows, there's fixed, but if you can load a whole bunch of other stuff in. Here you see the window and which way it's going to face. So the way that windows, for the most part, end up working, you want your sill, your larger, so if this is your pane of glass, you want the pane of glass further to the outside. And you can start to change that when you hit this edit type. You can get a whole bunch more properties than just the ones that are here for each, whether it's a wall, whether it's a door. This brings up a whole bunch of additional stuff that I'll get into later. But if this inset, if I want to make this, say, 3 inches, I can hit OK, and it jumps the pane back a little bit. So, and like I said, you can hit this button and it'll flip back and forth, same as the doors. So if I go to my 3D view now, I can see I have a door and I have a window in here. If you want to see these in color, you can come down here and say, okay, I want it as a shaded view, and there's kind of default colors that jump in to stuff. As I get into more, I'll show you how to change those colors. And then you can also go to realistic. If you start applying textures to stuff, realistic mode will show you exactly what it's going to look like. It'll give you a best guess at what it's going to look like without rendering it. So this is a wood door. You can see how all this is displaying as wood. This is more of just like a painted color. Same thing here on the window. You've got a wood sash and wood frame and everything. So this can be a really nice mode to work in your 3D view to see kind of how things are playing out and make sure everything has the correct material applied and that sort of thing. If we come up here, structure, you probably won't be using this a whole lot. Systems, probably not much. You're probably not going to be putting your pipe fittings and stuff like that into your things. If you want to insert, you can link a CAD file, stuff like that. Annotate, this can be really useful if you're trying to figure something out. You don't want to model it in 3D, but you just want to sketch something in real quick. You can use detail lines. I've created DL as my hotkey for that. It is a little bit further across the keyboard, but for the most part, I can jump to that pretty quick. So if I hit DL, I can sketch some lines in here. And essentially, DL creates view specific. So if I go to my 3D view, these are not going to show up. But you can kind of sketch some ideas out and run some various kind of reference points and stuff. And I can change what these look like. Is it a hidden line where it's dashed? Is it a center line where it's dash, short dash, long dash? Overhead views, how thick are they? Are they wide, thin, medium? As you zoom in, yours may look like this. And this can be nice, but you see how this starts to get a little muddy. I know there's more to this window here, and it's kind of hard to see what's going on there. If you come up here, there's this thin lines. I have it hotkeyed to TL, but if I hit that, it makes everything the same line weight for right now. And this is nice when you're working to have everything kind of the same line weight. It's the thinnest line weight, so you can see points and see how things are intersecting and various things like that. It can be useful to work in this mode, and then when you print stuff, you turn it off to see just how things are looking. Do you want to adjust your line weights and things like that? So annotate, this is all of your two-dimensional stuff. The analyze tab we won't be using in this class, but if you're into sustainable design and energy analysis and stuff like that, come talk to me and I'll kind of run you through this fairly quick. It's fairly simple. It's not the best tool in the world, but it'll get you kind of a decent start at least. Masking site, this is, you want to create your site, your topo surface. You click points and set elevations and it'll create a topo for you. If you have a CAD file, a lot of times you can get CAD files of sites, and once you get out in the real world, a lot of times they'll have CAD files of your site that you can get from surveyors and stuff like that. You can create a topo surface off of a CAD file. You just tell it, this is the CAD file I want. These are the layers within that CAD file to use for the topo surface, and it generates it. Site components, these are your trees and various things like that. The trees in Revit can be okay. They're not my favorite, but as we get into rendering and stuff like that, I'll tell you how I go about doing trees and things like that. Collaborate, we won't deal with this at all. This is if you're working with multiple people. View, this is another tab where you can create drafting views. Drafting views are essentially, you just create a CAD type view where you're just drawing everything. Can be good for small details and things like that. Elevation, if you want to create another elevation, if I click this and you see how it orients itself to kind of the wall that's closest, so it automatically does that. If I had a wall at a 45-degree angle, it would orient to that, so I could create an elevation view of that wall. And this is something that you can either hit escape to get out of a tool. So I have this, I can hit escape and it backs out. Or I've gotten into the habit of, rather than moving my hand up to hit escape, I right click and hit cancel a couple times, and it's something really, really fast you can do over and over again to back yourself out of tools. So callouts, I want a view of just that, and if I right click on it and hit go to view, now it's a zoomed in version of that. And then sections. This is one of the more useful tools, or views, just because you can use these, you can use a ton of these, just to get into position of whatever you want to. You want to be working straight on with a wall or straight on with whatever you're dealing with. So you can create tons and tons of sections that cut through stuff to see how things are working, to get the view that you want. So if I hit draw this section, it shows me it's coming to this point and it's extending. I'm seeing stuff to this point. So if I right click on this and hit go to view, now it shows me I've got this level 2, level 1, and I can see my door and my window. If I see these little hollow circles here, I can grab this and pull these off to the side and get them kind of out of my way. And then this is my view box. I can drag this out if I wanted to see more or see higher, various stuff like that. And within this view, I can also change what my sill height is, what my head height is, stuff like that on my wall. With my window, with my doors, stuff like that. I can also change it here. If for whatever reason I know the sill height, when I place it in plan, I can go ahead and change that so that I don't have to create a section view just to go ahead and do that. So that can be fairly useful as well. Manage. This is where your material editor is. I'm going to be doing a whole big long thing on materials. That can get real tedious. And be a little bit of a pain, but getting your materials right is one of the 3 biggest things in terms of getting your renderings to look great. Add-ins, if you have an add-in, there will be some stuff there, but modify, this is where your trim, your align, various stuff like that is. So, if I drew a wall and it was off center there and I wanted to align it, you can say I want to jump to the center, I want to jump to the face. So if, say, this wall, rather than 8 inches, it was 5 inches, and I wanted to align this side with this side, I can go ahead and do that. So you click the object that you want to align to, and then click the object that is moving. And then trim up. Little off there. Okay, so trim, it's right here. So same as in AutoCAD, except you're trimming, you're clicking what you want to keep. I know in AutoCAD it's kind of backwards, but I'm clicking, I want this side of it and I want this side of it, and so it cleans that joint up. If you have something like, let's take this and extend this out here, we can click this and say I want to extend to this point, and I'm going to extend these multiple things to that. It'll jump those up there. You've got your mirror draw axis. Is you click an item, click the mirror, and then you're going to draw what you wanted around. So maybe I wanted that at 22 degrees, it's mirroring over that, now it mirrors it. Whereas this is pick an axis, so I'm picking a wall, I'm picking some point, and then it will mirror over that. So offset, same thing as in AutoCAD. It defaults to a foot. If I want to make it 4 foot, I can go ahead and do that, and then it'll show you which side it's going to offset to, and you just click and it does it. All of that stuff is stuff that you'll use a decent amount. This is the split commands here. Let's see, other things. You got dimensions. Measure can be fairly useful. You don't use it a lot, but occasionally it's not a dimension string, but it's just, okay, and here's a chain. I want to know what the perimeter of this rectangle is as I click around it. And then I'll click back here. And it shows in the top left corner up here, you see how it jumps to 190? If you watch this box and I move this back to this point and hover over it, the whole chain that I just created is 145 foot 6 and 13/16. So that can be fairly useful, but it doesn't add anything to your model or anything like that. So, for right now, I think that's a decent stopping point in terms of your overall user interface and things like that. Down here is a whole another set of tools that we'll use at various points. Obviously, here's your scale. You can click it here and change it, or you can click it down here and start to change what scale this is. When you change your scale, if I go from 1/8 to 1 foot, the only things that are going to change are your annotations. So your dimensions and stuff like that are constrained to a certain size. That way they don't get too huge. Mostly these are things that have text involved with them. So when you put them on a sheet and you print them out, your text doesn't blow up with your model. It stays the same size. So as you change stuff, as you saw, the head of this changes, gets a little bit bigger. That way you can read it and see what's going on and everything. But as you change your scale, certain things will stay the same, others won't. So yeah, and then if I come back to my 3D view, you can see all the random nonsense that I've created. Okay, so that's your basic introduction to Revit.